United States of America, 2029 AD. Due to the dictatorial government of Emperor Garuda, a number of lives have been lost. In order to defeat the Emperor Garuda, two shadows appear. Ninja, they are called. Well, that's pretty brief, but I guess that's what we're going with. Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Play Shadow of the Ninja. Another one of my favorite little ninja-type games on the NES, and a bit unique for this one, we actually have two playable characters, Hayate and Kaede. However, they have no gameplay differences here in this version of the game. They are just a difference of which sprite you like more, and I like Kaede's more, so we're going with that. So starting off, control is pretty much what you should be used to if you played a lot of other games in this little subgenre over the years. B is attack, A is jump, and your D-pad's the usual, and the game controls pretty sharply. I don't think it's as sharp as some of the Ninja Gaiden games on the console, but it does decently well. The big difference is, in some of the Ninja Gaiden games you can climb on walls, in this you can cling to ceilings and press up or down to just either drop or flip up through them. So we have multiple altitudes we can work with here. There are 3 weapon types in the game. By default, both characters have the standard katana that can be upgraded by collecting more katana throughout the game. There's throwing stars, as well as bombs, which are limited items that you can grab. There's items in the chests all over the place, including health items like the one I just grabbed. And there's also the chain sickle weapon, the Kusarigama. I stick with the Kusarigama for a lot of the early game stages because of a little trick you can pull off with it, where if you're in very specific points of enemy hitboxes, you can get 2 hits in at once with very little invincibility frames to worry about, so it's very good for killing out bosses or mini-bosses throughout the early game stages. Weapons do get upgraded the more you grab them. It's most noticeable, though, with the katana, because the more katanas you grab in a row, I don't know how I'm not getting hit by those 2 guys, you get a shockwave added to your katana's slash that will travel forward. It travels a little bit at first, and then if you max it out, it travels, I think, most of the screen. And that's very good for keeping your distance from boss fights. With that said, it's very easy to take hits in this game, so don't feel too bad if you lose it. I'd say difficulty-wise, this game is easier than any of the 3 Ninja Gaidens on the system. But there's definitely moments where you can be thrown off or just kind of get weird stuff happening, like these football tackle guys who can just force you off a platform and almost make you fall into a bottomless pit, almost. But what's a little unique for this game as well, yeah, there's 2 playable characters, but there's a reason they basically have no difference. This is one of the few games of this genre I can think of, period, that is multiplayer. At the start of the game, you can bring in 2 players, and the game can progress completely through as normal. I think they might throw a few more enemies at you, or health values might be slightly changed to adjust for that. But it's a fun experience. In fact, something I didn't know would happen at the time of recording the footage for this, it looks like the remake this game is getting is leaning really hard on that, even in the trailer. Yeah, this game's getting a remake, Shadow of the Ninja Reborn. I forget when it's coming out. It might actually not be out by the time this gets uploaded because Majora's Mask is currently being uploaded, so my backlog isn't what it used to be for videos. But literally 2 days after I recorded the footage for this LP is when that got revealed. And that just, it feels like fate is playing a little bit of a piece there. With that said, now we're on to stage 1-4, which is the stage 1 boss. This is the Missile Man, I think is his name? Despite being named that, I don't think it actively has a missile attack unless it just only gets to do that at certain points in its health bar. It can fire various volleys of energy at you that go in a couple different lengths across the screen. It can try to home in on you by doing a large leap to the top of the screen and then falling down. And I think it also has a short hop it can do to try to throw you off. It's not a very hard boss, as you can see. The Kusarigama, very good at melting its HP if you get the positioning just right on it, which is the reason why I prefer that weapon for a lot of the early game. Later stages, though, I do recommend the katana more so, if only just because you can get a bigger distance with it. With that said, each of the stages in the game does actually have like a short bio in the manual. For instance, the last stage was the seaport. Travel across the rusting remains of a fleet of derelict ships. Enemies are hidden in the hulls and scaffoldings of these once mighty seagoing vessels, whereas this is the underground sewers, Wade through the bowels of the corrupted city as you wage your battle against Garuda's slimiest defenders. Mercenaries appear from the darkest corners of this subterranean nightmare. And by that they mean weird little mecha eyes that will swap between which hole they come out of. And the lower they get on HP, the faster they will actually spurt out of the hole to try and get you while you're on their side of the screen. Don't worry if you take a lot of damage here. The game honestly does have plentiful health pickups compared to some other games in this exact subgenre. And most enemies don't do enough damage to be worth it. Usually you do only take one value at a time, and your weapon has a good enough range that as long as you're in front of an enemy, you're probably going to be able to kill them first. Though there are some points in this game where you should just rush past enemies because they're probably not going to be worth fighting, especially if you're using things like the bomb sub-weapons or throwing stars, because you might want to save those for boss fights to keep them even more at a distance. But one thing you should note, there's no timer in the stages in this game. It's not like Ninja Gaiden, so if you're a little anxious about a jump, don't worry, take your time, you should be fine. The platforming in this game isn't the problem at times, it's the enemy spam, and sometimes how hard their attacks can be to dodge. As well as how much health some of the later game bosses have, but that's a bit of a different topic. Also, something you don't really see me use throughout the LP. You do actually have one more attack I haven't talked about yet, where if you hold the B button, your health gauge eventually starts glowing. If you hold it long enough, you will unleash a gigantic screen nuke move that actively takes some of your health to use. There are some uses for it, but I'm a bit conservative with my health in the long run. On top of that, and you don't see me start going after these until some of the later stages, there are actively hidden items in the level design, sort of like how they're hidden in DuckTales, where you just have to attack a certain area and know they're there and they'll drop down. These can range from various weapon pickups in case you want a certain one at times, extra health pickups, or I think there's a scroll item, and I think that also increases the range of your weaponry, but it's relatively rare without knowing where some of them are, so it's not really worth looking for them in a lot of cases for me. With that said, time for the stage 2 boss. This is the killer tank. It's got a giant core up in the top here you can throw bombs at to completely decimate the health, because every frame of the explosion counts as an extra hit if memory serves. That fight can be kind of troublesome if you let it go on too long, because it's got a giant railgun just beneath where we are right now that can fire at you when you're on the ground. It's pretty hard to dodge. It fires bombs from the top of it that will try to track onto your position. The only real safe space is if you hug the section, like just to the bottom left of where the weak point is. But even then, like, that's not exactly the most reliable strat. Now, I call this game easier than most of the Ninja Gaidens on the system, and I think that is true. But one thing to note, there are fewer checkpoints. Every death counts as a game over outright, and you have, I think by default, 5 continues that you're allowed to use, and whenever you die, you are sent back to the start of the subsection of the stage you are in. So some of the later stages in that regard can be endurance rounds, admittedly. Like say if I die back in like 1-3, I'd be sent back to the start of 1-3 in specific. It's really only like the last 2 of the 5 stages in the game that's super punishing in, because the first 3 stages are very short in comparison. It's actually why this game is being done in one video, because I didn't want to have a 12-minute video and then an 18. I want my, with games this short, I want my parts to be either equal length or just all done in one. For the sake of my own organizational habits. So this game at some point was actively going to get a port to the Game Boy. And that technically still happened, but it wasn't released as a Shadow of the Ninja game. It was changed relatively drastically from my memory and ended up becoming Ninja Gaiden Shadow, so that the Game Boy would have a Ninja Gaiden title to call its own. And that game's alright, it's actually partially why I'm tackling this, so whenever I tackle Ninja Gaiden Shadow, I don't have to go on a 2-minute long spiel explaining what Shadow of the Ninja itself was. That's actually part of why I'm kind of surprised the remake of this is happening at all. Because I figured this is just one of those IPs that was sort of left in the dust, or just became adopted as a part of another series at this point. Honestly, kind of like what happened to the company itself to an extent, because this was a Natsume game. Particularly, this is a lot of the same dev team as the 2 Power Blade games I've already covered. I think the Jetman game, and even most of the early, if not all of the mainline Metabots RPGs, even though we've only have gotten a couple of those over here in the West. As for my own history with the game, though, it's one I can't exactly remember. I want to say this was just one of those I found, like when scrolling through ROM lists on like Cool ROM back in the days, or OK ROMs back in the day, because I just was looking for NES games to play, and I saw the word ninja, and I went, ooh, ninja games are usually cool, and you know what? Young me was right for that, and it has continued to be true to this day. But it's one of those where it just kind of entered my life at some point, and I never really forgot about it, kind of deals. Also, a hidden item I actually do know is that health pickup I just grabbed, and that's always a good one to grab because this stage can drain your health if you're a little too reckless, on top of the fact coming up on the boss fight, and arguably my least favorite boss fight in the game. This coming up here is the Golden Samurai. This thing's going to, I guess, assemble itself on either the left or the right side of the screen and try to approach you and attack. Depending on which side of the screen it's on, the one you do damage to it, it'll split off in the opposite direction to do just a fancy little, I'm hit animation before reassembling. That means if it's on the same side as you and you hit it enough, though, it will actively fly into you, meaning it's very easy to take damage in this fight. Not the biggest fan of this one. It doesn't even have a lot of attacks that are annoying outside of it flying into you. It just has like a sword slash or two. But this is also the first time in the game we're seeing bosses that just have a lot of health. They have more health than is physically displayed, and there's no way to tell where you're at in the health besides just memorizing the amount of hits they take until you actively see how few HP they have left. It's one of those annoying ways of displaying health I'm not the biggest fan of. I actually kind of wish they'd pulled a Kokarone here, weirdly, and would just have like a little dot on like the top left of the health bar to indicate an entire full health bar on top of that. But, oh well. Still not the very longest boss, but it's very easy to take damage in that one. And with that, we're already on to the penultimate stage in the game, Stage 4. Which might be my least favorite stage in some regards. It's between this or Stage 5. The big thing is this is where the subsections of the stages start getting much longer, to the point of a death is starting to get very costly. And while you do have plenty of continues compared to some other games, if you get a game over, something to keep in mind is that this game does have a low select code. I think it's A 4 times, B 4 times, A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, and then if the sound plays, you're good. And then, it's one of those weird ones where you have to have both controllers in, and then you have to hold a selective amount of buttons to skip to a certain stage and then press start. So, like, if you wanted to go to stage 1-4 specifically, you'd have to hold A and B on controller 2 and then press start. If you wanted to go to 3-1, you have to hold B on controller 1 and then A and B on controller 2. A little bit complicated, and it does mean you need to have two controllers potentially mapped or plugged in, which is kind of annoying, but oh well, at least it's there. I'm of the mindset that level select codes in games that don't have unlimited continues are a necessity for debugging, for one thing, but also just because you've already proven you can beat the stage. I'm of the mentality that you might as well, especially if you're not trying to just beat it in one sitting. Like, if you're trying to actively beat it in one sitting, yeah, don't use the level select code, but on a casual first run, I don't blame people for using those whatsoever. Unless they're just trying to skip forward in the game by skipping game stuff, period. Like, saying, like, alright, I beat stage 1 and 2, but I'm gonna skip all stage 3. Nah, I don't think that, I think that's a little wrong, but hey, let people play games the way they want to play games, you know? Unless they're actively harming other players on online stuff. This hallway is a bit of a hellscape. There are constant cannons firing high and low projectiles that you can only destroy by targeting the little pink dots on top of them. Problem, most of your attacks aren't gonna be able to hit those without you probably taking damage first, except for the bombs. I think the way things like the bombs get their distance upgrades is the more you've collected, the further you can throw them and they can slide along the ground, which can be kind of useful. This is the part of the stage that I really recommend practicing some patience on, because it's very easy to try to rush through it and take some stupid deaths to bottomless pits. But also, there's a little bit of a quirky thing here, where we're on conveyor belts, of course, and that's slowing our left to right movement, but in order to get through some of these little hazards without getting hit, you actively do need to jump into the ceiling above you to speed yourself up a little bit, because those extra frames you're not on the conveyor belt actively do speed you up enough to the point where it makes it doable. I'm not the biggest fan of that. It kind of feels like they just were like, alright, here's a little quirk of the control, let's actively use it. Probably could have signposted that a little bit differently, but oh well. Makes me really curious what they're going to actively change in the remake, honestly. to make the game more approachable for modern audiences in terms of like level design and all that. They're doing a great job on the visuals already, I'll tell you that much, because that trailer looks like they're going for somewhere between a like late 16-bit era game on the consoles and an arcade game at that exact time, so like early 32-bit stuff with very fluid animations. It looks gorgeous. I'm excited. Oh, also, I just realized I forgot to read the bio for the last stage and this one. The last stage was the rooftops of the city. Make your way across the tops of the skyscraper in your quest to defeat Garuda, meet up with the dreaded Golden Samurai, and this is the Air Fortress. Stow away aboard this flying platform of death. One false move and it's a long way to the pavement below. Yeah. This part of the stage is where things get really annoying, because now we have very slow-moving hitboxes, essentially. They can't fire projectiles at you, but they're there to take up the level design more than anything, and make you potentially get dragged to your death above or below by the moving platforms around here. I'm not the biggest fan of this kind of pace breaker in these types of games. Thankfully, you can take advantage of a very often used little mechanic thing with games like this. For one thing, the bombs will just kind of tear into their health. Ooh, that was close. But also, if you're close enough to them where you're gonna get hit, if you start mashing the attack button while on one of the platforms, they'll get stunned by your attack and take damage. But during that period, they're not moving. I don't think their hitbox is active, so you will just be able to move straight through them. The biggest case you could use that is with the one that's actually on screen right now as it goes off screen and then comes back up. Because this is arguably some of the tightest jumps in the game right here. The game's platforming isn't usually too hard because it's not usually over bottomless death to this extent, but making some of the jumps around here can be very tight and comparatively punishing to the rest of the game. Unrelated tangent, this game's soundtrack kicks ass. There are 2 people credited in this game's music team, Iku Mizutani and Koichi Yamanishi. The former did work on the original Metal Gear, Snatcher, a lot of work on that, Shatterhand, various Metabots games, and in a very personal note for me, one of the GBA Power Ranger games, Ninja Storm in particular, a game I don't think I ever finished, or if I did it once and I remember nothing about it. As well as some scattered King of Fighters stuff, Spanky's Quest, I think. The latter only did work on this, Dragon Fighter, and Amazing Penguin. Which I'll probably at least tackle Dragon Fighter at some point, because that's another NES platformer, which are games I always like to tackle. Either way, time for the boss of this stage. This is Captain Huck. To start, he's just going to be doing a lot of jumping and kicking to try and attack you while his bird flies overhead. His bird might have an attack. The big thing is, once you reach about the halfway point of his health bar, he and the bird fuse into Birdman, as seen in the movie the same name from, it was like 2018, 19, I forget. I don't remember much about that movie besides the ending being weird. When he becomes the bird, his health regenerates to max, and the fight gets a little more complicated. He's going to stay up at the top of the screen and either try to do a dive bomb into you, which is very fast, or fire 3 lasers that are aimed diagonally that are pretty easy to dodge as long as you're below him. The dive is easily the harder thing to dodge, especially if you're far into the screen, because you won't have many ways to escape from his dive arc. But since he spends so long in the fight above you, the time he's actively down there gives you so much time to attack him in comparison that his health bar drains pretty quickly. This stage can be kind of rough, but it's a big matter of just patience and war of attrition. In fact, I think the entire game is really... The most frustrating place to die in the game is the final boss, because that means you have to do basically the entire latter half of the final stage over again, as we'll talk about in a few moments. Speaking of which, time for the final stage. This is the final fortress. The worst for last. Garuda himself is waiting for you as you enter his inner sanctum of evil. The toughest adversaries and meanest challenges lie between you and the Master of Evil. Oh yeah, I guess I also should note, there is like a more in-depth version of the story in the manual itself. It's the year 2029 AD and a madman controls the largest city in America, read based off the intro of the game, New York City. The Emperor Garuda and his followers have built an impregnable stronghold as a monument to his evil. Conventional forces have been unable to stop his malevolent plans for total control, but Garuda is worried. Reports have reached him that 2 figures have breached the outskirts of his city's defenses. For the first time, he feels an inner chill, for he knows the invaders are ninjas. Hayate and Lady Kaede are ninjas of the Iga clan. Their mission is to infiltrate the fortress of Garuda and destroy his wicked empire. They are armed with the weapons of ninjutsu, the katana, the shuriken, and the kusarigama. Together, they may have the strength to topple the empire. The start of this stage can be pretty rough, even early on, because you got these landmines that detonate an entire section of land if you get too close to them. Thankfully, you can walk on it after the fact, but you can't easily jump over them, because they detonate pretty quickly. And we got lasers that come out of the wall every period here and there. And especially early on in the stage, you like to place them in such a way where you don't know they're going to be there until they've scrolled on screen. So if you know they're there, they're easy to dodge. Otherwise, it's very easy to take some very cheap hits in this stage, which is one of the reasons this is one of my least favorite stages in the game. I guess in that regard, it is kind of annoying that a game this short means that maybe I don't like 40% of the game's stages just about. But the game is so short, ultimately, it just doesn't feel worth complaining about in that regard, I guess. It's one of those things where if the game were harder, some parts would be more worth complaining about, because then you maybe get into the Ninja Gaiden situation where you're replaying the same stage over and over and over again, especially if they do any dumb checkpoint stuff like Ninja Gaiden 1 did with the final boss. But comparatively, it's so easy that it's just not really a note. These enemies can be kind of annoying to dodge because the trajectory that their rings can go on can be a little weird compared to everything else in the game. But thankfully, many enemies in this game that fire projectiles fall pretty quickly to just getting in their face and spamming the button in such a way that they will not be able to attack because of their stun frames. So in that regard, aggression can be a pretty handy tool against just the standard enemy types in the game. And now I'm very much relying on the katana because the kusarigama just isn't as good this late in. So that stage transition right there, if you die to the final boss, you're being sent all the way back here, and that's annoying because, for one thing, we have the only auto-scroller in the game coming up here, and it can be kind of annoying to get through. But also, enemies in this section of the stage have shields that will guard them against any attack, basically, and you need to wait for them to open up for that, and that's kind of annoying. Also, there you saw one of the properties that the shuriken can get. As you upgrade them, they can become homing shuriken. I think they will only aim if an enemy's hitbox is active on the screen, so say if you're spam firing and there's two on stage, they might actively just kind of fly between the two of them. Which can be kind of weird, but there's not a lot of times where there are that many enemies just mobbed on the screen. We're actually coming up one of the few times in the game right here, because this auto-scroller can be kind of crowded with the amount of enemies there are, and especially their hitboxes, or rather how much ground their attacks can cover. For instance, if I just jumped up right there, I would have absolutely hit either that enemy or the sword itself, and the spear throwers could have hit me while I was down there anyway. Fall here is instant death unless you fall onto a platform, so be careful. Take advantage of the fact you can actively climb left and right across platforms you cling to maybe get to a point where enemies won't be able to touch you as easily. And you should probably get through fine eventually. Putting an auto-scroller like this at the very end just feels weird. Like, I guess it's here to build tension before the final boss, but it's also just kind of a weird place to put it. Near the top of this auto-scroller, though, you are given a choice of going up a left or right ladder path, and there's an item on you for both. I think on the left is a scroll that will extend the range of your weapon. On the right, I think, is a health restorative. On most cases, I would recommend going for the right unless you're already full on health, in which case you might as well go for the weapon extender. For now, though, it's time for the final boss against Emperor Garuda himself, and this fight's a little bit of a tricky note, in that you have ladders on the left and right side of the screen you can enter to avoid attacks. But they know you could do that, so if you're on one of the ladders in this boss fight, the dragon statues to the left and right of the screen, they'll fire homing shots that can very easily chip your health down, so be careful of those. Garuda himself, though, has got a pretty easy pattern. He will do a swipe at you that he'll run up to you to do. He'll jump up and fire 3 little projectiles down that create wind barriers you need to either stand between or away from. He'll fire his own little kunai across at you, and then he'll repeat from the start. But as you get through his health, he does actively get faster and faster, and can even do some little feints with it, where he maybe will do a jump instead of just running at you, or he'll throw fewer projectiles to the ground to create the barriers. A lot of health, so be careful of that. If you enter with the health upgrade, or the health pickup we just got, you should be fine on that regard as long as you keep your distance. The really annoying thing actually comes into effect of the little upgrade system I haven't mentioned yet. If you get hit in the game, you do actively get punished more and more you get hit by your weapon upgrades being diminished. So say if you have the katana upgraded to its max, so you have the shockwave at its max range. If you get hit once or twice, it goes down a rank, and then it goes down a rank again. If you get to the point where you're back at the base katana, this fight can be kind of rough. And in that regard, having the Kusarigama the entire game can be handy because you always have a pretty decent range to your attacks. It's just that its firing rate isn't nearly as strong as the katana in that regard. So yeah, now we're at the point where he's turned orange and he's attacking faster, but at the same time, this fight's not exactly hard, it's just kind of an endurance round. That's game. At the end of the life and death struggle. Garuda was overthrown. The two ninja vanish into darkness. To prepare for the next battle. I love this credits theme. This song kicks ass. That's Shadow and the Ninja. It's short, it's sweet, it's a good ninja-type platformer that is a good comparison to, I'd say, at least Ninja Gaiden 1 in the fun quality. I think there are better games of this subgenre on the NES, or in total, like The Messenger, Ninja Gaiden 2, Power Blade 1. But this is still a strong contender, and I'm very much looking forward to the remake. I really did not expect that to get revealed at all, and I'm very excited for it to come out. I'll probably tackle that at some point after it comes out. If you want to play the game, I think it was only ever released on the NES, though. I don't think there were virtual console versions, unless I'm just plain forgetting about something, which, that's always possible. There are follow-ups to it, sort of, in Ninja Gaiden Shadow. But those are technically at that point a very different game type, so it's all up to you whether or not you want to play it. I'd say it's worth a shot if you like these types of games. The soundtrack alone is worth looking up, though. This soundtrack just kicks all sorts of ass. But with that, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, have a great night, take care, and I'll see you guys next Let's Play, whatever that may be. See you guys then.